Hello and welcome to our Acquisitive Unite session, What's New in Business Central 2024 Wave 1. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, just a few reminders about the session today. One, please ask questions throughout the session as you need to. Put them in your question or chat panel, and we will be answering questions throughout the session today. So we want to make sure everybody gets all the information they require at today's session. So please ask your questions, and we will make sure you get the answers. All these sessions are, in fact, being recorded and will be available in the recordings panel after the event is complete. They will be available to look at and view anytime you like and refresh your memory on a few things that you may have seen today. Of course, one of the very important things we want to mention is the prizes we're giving away at the end of the day today. So make sure you fill out the post-session surveys to get yourself into those prize draws, as many ballots as you can so you increase your odds of winning. So make sure to check for that at the end of the session today. So my name is Lonnie Holmes. I am a senior business solutions consultant with the Acquisitive team, and I'm going to be walking you through some of the new features in the Business Central Wave 1 2024 release. I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of these key features are that were released, and this, of course, is not a complete listing, but maybe what I feel are some of the most relevant to the audience today. And then we'll show you a live demo of a few of these new features following the overview. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to talk about that is new to Business Central's 2024 Wave 1 release is some consolidation functionality. So if you are using consolidation companies in Business Central, you will know that from an exchange rate perspective, if you have to rerun consolidation for a prior period, you have to go back and revisit what the exchange rates were at the time that you ran it and update those exchange rates respectively before you rerun, or it can cause differences in what your consolidation results would have been previously. So what they've done now is they've set up a business unit currencies window that allows you to select from previous consolidations the rate you want to use, so that, again, when you're running consolidations or having to rerun consolidations for adjustments, you can actually refer back to what was used in the past, making it a lot easier to source. Also on the financial side, we have some account revaluation functionality. So this is actually a really good feature. We have a lot of clients who deal in multi-currency, and in multi-currency, most of the time, the only revaluation functionality that exists is that around your subledgers. So what they've actually done here now is allow you to set up accounts where you can identify those accounts as having a revaluation requirement so that you can actually, as part of your revaluation exercise at the end of every month, be able to adjust for your exchange rates and create a more accurate picture of what that foreign currency reporting would look like. So there's a batch job that you would run. This is actually called GL currency revaluation. So it is actually a separate process in Business Central from your subledgers, but still giving you that great capability to revalue those accounts that you use specifically for foreign currency, or that you need to do revaluations for. I know we have some clients that do a lot of revenue entries in foreign currency and need to be able to revalue those accounts accordingly. So Business Central has put that in place for you. The other option now on the sales side is the ability to assign salespeople at the actual ship to address. So previously at the customer level, you could add a salesperson at the customer card level, which would default then into sales transactions you used for that particular customer. They've actually now done this a level deeper, and in that they are putting in a ship to address salesperson. So essentially, the ship to address then can have its own salespeople. If you have multiple locations for a customer and salespeople are assigned differently based on those locations, then you can create those default salespeople at the ship to address level. So you can see in our screenshots here that we're creating those salespeople at that ship to. And we're going to show you that in the demo today. So you'll get a little bit of visibility to what that's going to look like. Deferral codes. Now, I know there are probably many of our clients on here who are not actually using deferral codes, and what I will say is you should be. They're incredibly useful for automation of your deferred revenue and prepaid expenses recognition. And generally, these used to only be available on sales invoices, purchase invoices, or general ledger transactions. They've actually now added the deferral function into sales and purchase journals. So you don't actually have to create a full-fledged purchase invoice in order to use the deferral. You can use a purchase journal, which is a little bit simpler. And again, we'll go through that exercise today. Attach documents for archived quotes and orders. So this is actually a really interesting one. What most people may not realize is that when you add attachments into, say, a purchase order, if that purchase order gets received and invoiced from the PO, that PO gets automatically archived and removed from your open PO list. What you may not realize is that the attachments don't stay with the PO, they flow to the invoice. Now, that's great if that's how you do your invoicing, but there are a lot of instances where we have clients who receive from a PO, but they actually create the PO invoice from the purchase invoice window using the get receipt lines function. And what happens there is those attachments don't flow through, but they also don't stay with the PO when the PO is closed. So this is now actually allowing you to keep attachments that are associated to quotes or orders that get archived with them, so that if you do that process of the get receipt lines, you still have the visibility to go back to the PO and see any attachments that may have been there at that time. This is a really small change, but I think helps to alleviate some confusion for a lot of users when they're using Business Central. We use, they used to call this jobs. A lot of people always referred to it as projects, and we still do as well. So they've actually now just aligned that language with how people refer to it, and they've changed jobs now into projects. You can see through the search, if you search jobs, it's now just going to come up with projects. So if you're still in the habit of searching jobs, don't worry, you're still going to be able to get where you need to go. Archiving projects is a new function that has been added this year as well. What you can now do is in your project setup, you have the ability to archive projects, meaning that if you post transactions into the system, a version of that particular project is taken as a snapshot and saved as an archived view. This way, if the project gets deleted or changes are made to it, you can still refer back to these archived versions to see what had happened prior to that. Um, if you don't have any posted transactions on a project and you've archived it and then um, realize, oh, you know what, we want to restore back to the archived version, the system's actually giving you the ability to do a restoration of those archived versions as well. So in your project setup, you will have to go in and determine how you want to archive always, meaning it's just going to archive anytime there are changes made. A question, so it will ask you each time if you want to archive that version of the project or never, if you don't want to retain any archives at all. The system will default this to never as the feature is rolled out. So you need to actually go into your project setup window and make that change if you want to make it question or always. So this is actually a really interesting one. They have now created the ability for you to invoice multiple customers from one project. So if you have sort of a parent project where you're doing a larger scale project, but there are pieces of the project that potentially are being invoiced to other customers or other people, you could create tasks within the system and actually have a different bill to customer with each task. So helping you sort of manage your invoicing process, but also managing the budget because you don't have to create separate projects now for those different billing customers, which is what you would have had to do before, then having to pull those projects by report to consolidate the reporting. So this is actually a nice streamlined way to get the reports you need for one project, but bill the respective customers that need to be billed. Also, one of the functions they've added to the project module is previously when you wanted to invoice something, you had to go into the project, pick the job planning lines that you wanted to bill, and create the sales invoice from there. But that only allowed you then to bill your customer for one project at a time. Now, while most of our clients, that's what they would do, they don't generally bill um, multiple projects on one invoice for a customer. You are now getting the ability to do that. So, and a little bit more streamlined process to actually add the lines for your project into your invoicing. So you can actually do it right from the sales invoice using this new feature, Get Project Planning Lines, and we're going to go through that as well today. On the project task card, if you are dealing with um, inventory and materials that are used for projects or jobs, you now have the ability to default location codes or warehouses and bin codes where your material is stored. Example being, if you create bins to store material specific for one project, you can now create that bin code, assign it to this project, and that's the default that's used as you actually use your materials for the project. So with that, let's actually take a look at what's in Business Central and show you these features. So I'm going to just minimize this and I'm going to pull up my Business Central environment. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the general ledger side. So I'm actually going to pop over into my chart of accounts. And in here, I'm going to pick up this US fixed deposit account. So for this foreign currency, what they have done is in the general ledger account card, you will notice they've added a tab called revaluation. So this allows you to set the parameters for this account to determine whether or not this particular account should be revalued. So you can set it up with a source currency posting of multiple currencies, meaning it could be a mix of your functional and other currencies in the system that you may use. Same currency, which means that if I put in a USD currency code in here, it's only going to allow me to post transactions in that currency, or local currency only. So it's only my functional currency. So the most common one you're probably going to use is multiple currencies because you probably have accounts where you're having both your functional values and potentially foreign currency transactions posted to. The most important part, of course, are these right here. You want to make sure that you indicate whether or not you want this account to be revalued, and is it an unrealized revaluation or a realized? And in most cases, they're usually unrealized at this stage, particularly if it's a balance sheet account. So that's the really important setup piece that we want to make sure is set up in Business Central. The other thing you'll want to make note of is they've added this awesome function in here where you can now see both the amount in source currency and in local currency. So this is key. I think this was one of the biggest pet peeves a lot of people had with the multi-currency function in Business Central was that, oh yeah, I can do transactions in a different currency. However, I can't actually see any visibility into what that was unless I drill back to the original transaction. So now your general ledger is giving you that access quickly, easily, and it's accessible. And you would basically just be able to personalize these columns in and now have visibility to all those things. So really handy and making the multi-currency piece a lot more functional within Business Central. All right, let's shift gears on to a little bit of the sales side. So one of the features that I had talked about was the salesperson, and just make a list view here, the salesperson on the customer card. So if I click into a datum, my customer, you'll see I can expose some things here, and I have a salesperson code up here of JO. If I wanted, I can go up to my ship to addresses. And you can see I have various ship to addresses. I have one in Calgary, one in Edmonton, one in Toronto, and I can click on that Toronto code and I'm going to click show more. And you're going to see now I have a salesperson code in here of EH. So I have two different salespeople. One is sort of at the primary card level and one is at this ship to address level. So what does that mean when we're doing transactions? So I'm going to go into a sales invoice. And I'm just going to create a new sales invoice in here. So I'm going to pick up a datum. Okay, so by default, as soon as I pick up that customer, you're going to see my salesperson code comes in as JO because that's who's assigned at the main primary card level. But if I come down to the bottom into this shipping and billing section, and I change this to an alternate shipping address, and I'll choose Toronto, you'll now see my salesperson has changed. Okay, so this is a small change, but it does, allow for less clicking, more efficiencies in terms of the process, and less errors if you have customers who have various addresses, but different salespeople manage those different locations. All right. Sticking on the sales side, actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about the deferral side. So I'm going to go into a sales journal. And in my sales journal here, I've got a batch in here. I've created an entry in here for an invoice. And what you'll notice is on my GL account, I'm using a revenue account, a service contract sale. And this is an annual subscription that this customer is purchasing from me. So this is deferred revenue for me. So when I come in here, I entered my credit of 12,000 because I would be crediting revenue generally if I was entering a revenue transaction. And my balancing side is my customer account. So I've again selected that a datum customer. But now what you'll notice over here is this deferral code. So deferral codes, you can have as many deferral codes as you like, depending on the type of revenue recognition or prepaid expense allocation that you use. I'm using a 12-month revenue recognition. So when we create these deferral codes, it basically creates a template to tell us what's the structure of our revenue recognition. Do we recognize over a straight line? Do we recognize based on days per month? And how many periods would we generally recognize over? So the system's bringing that in for me, and it is also assuming my start date as my posting date, which is what I have in here as June 1st. So it then calculates my revenue recognition for those 12 months as $1,000. This was only available on either invoices or general ledger entries. So now by adding it here, again, I don't have to create a full-fledged purchase invoice or sales invoice in order to get that deferral entry in, but I can now associate it to the customer at a subledger level so that I can recognize that accordingly. So if we were to go take a look at our preview posting, what you're now going to see in here is a whole bunch of entries, right? So the first thing the system is doing is it is basically saying, okay, we were going to recognize this, but no, we have a deferral on here. So we're going to actually pull it out. So we're going to net this out to 0 for now, and we're going to put it into your deferred revenue account. And from there, we're going to recognize this every month for $1,000. And then of course, at the very bottom, we have your AR for 12,000. Okay, so really simple process. If you're not using deferral codes for deferred revenue or prepaid expenses, I highly recommend you look into it. We're happy to provide some training and insight into how to best use this tool, but it really does, minimize the amount of off-ledger tracking you do with deferred revenue and prepaid expenses. All right, so let's talk about the project side a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my project setup. And this is where you're going to find the new capability to archive your projects. So you'll see there's this new archiving tab down here at the bottom. And as I mentioned, the archive projects is going to be set to never by default, but you can modify that as a question or always. And then the system will continue to take snapshots of your project as changes or transactions are posted against that particular project. When you want to look at your archived projects, you can just type or search archive projects, and there is your project archives. So this will show you what's been archived for you. At this point, we're not archiving anything in this system, so there wouldn't be anything in that list. But just so you know, that's where you would find those pieces. So now I'm going to go into actual projects. Okay, and I'm going to actually pull up a project in here. So I'm going to pull up this one here. this Quizity Unite project that I created. So when you create a new project in the system, you have to assign a customer at the header level of the project. And previous to this version, that was the customer that was being billed, no questions asked. But now what they've allowed you to do is down here at the bottom, you'll find in this invoice and shipping tab, they've added a task billing method. So you can either um, bill one customer, meaning the header customer that you're associating to the project, or you have now the capability to do multiple customers. So how does that change the view? So if I look at one customer, what it would do is it would eliminate, sorry, I shouldn't have clicked that. It would eliminate this bill to customer column. Okay, so these two columns would disappear and it would assume that you are just billing the main customer at the top. But because I've chosen multiple customers, you can see in here, I have a customer number that's associated to the greater project. But for this task, I have a separate bill to customer, which is my School of Fine Art. Okay, so this is a really slick feature. I think this is actually something I haven't seen in a lot of products in the past. So I think this will be really handy for people who are doing, consolidated or larger projects that have multiple stakeholders or multiple customers involved in the process and in the billing exercise. Um, so that's how we would manage that. And just to show you quickly, I'm going to just create a new project really quickly, and I'll put in test. And I'll just select my tray research customer. So what you'll see here, right, that customer, those customer columns are not there at the moment. Okay, so then going into this invoice and shipping, if I change to multiple customers, it's going to pop that open for me. Okay, now you can only change this until the point that there are actually customers assigned or transactions posted. Once transactions are posted or anything like that, you are unable to change whether you're billing one customer or two. So just be aware of that and make sure that when you're setting up the projects, you've set it up the way you want for that project moving forward. The other thing I wanted to mention in here as well are the bin codes. So we mentioned that we can create some location and bin code defaults. So again, if you are an inventory based company where you're using materials or product for construction projects or projects of sorts, and you need to draw down on your inventory, maybe your inventory is in certain locations and maybe you have bins for certain projects. I know some companies will create bins specific for their project materials so that they know any materials in that bin are specific to that project. So now you have the ability to come in here and say, all of my product for this project is going to come out of our location main and it's going to come out of this standard bin. And maybe I actually have a bin called, job 60 or project 60 so that we know this bin is related to this project. So again, just minimizing the number of clicks and things that you have to do when you're utilizing your product and materials for your projects. All right, so the last feature I want to review with you today is the ability to bring in multiple projects into one invoice for a customer. So I'm actually on my sales invoices here. I'm going to go back into this Adatum one that I was creating earlier, and I'm going to go down into this lines menu, and I'm going to go to line functions. And what you'll see now at the bottom here is this get project planning lines. So this is an excellent way to be able to bill your customer. And if you do want to be able to bill a customer in one invoice for multiple projects or multiple tasks, this is going to be your ability to do that. So now you can see this particular customer has 3 projects on the go with us. If I wanted to bill out lines from, various areas of all of these projects in one invoice, I could just select them like so. I could select all of them if I wanted. And I can use either my control key or my shift key, depending on what I want to do in terms of ranges. And I would just click OK. And now it's going to bring in all of the relevant lines that have billable components associated to them and create that invoice. And of course, I can still go in, change any descriptions I want, and make any modifications to the actual invoice content or details. So making it a little bit easier to bring in your invoicing as it relates um, to projects. Now, what you didn't see there when we did that is it's only bringing stuff in that is set as billable, right? So you got to make sure that if you have lines that are budget only, they're not going to actually come across in here because they will have a zero billable line. Okay, so want to make sure your project planning lines are set up correctly to use this process. All right. So that sort of brings me to a close on the general demo. Um, from this perspective, now what I would like to do is just say, if you have any other questions at this stage, um, these are the contact details you can use to reach out to us. Also, you can continue to put your questions in the panel and we'll answer them as best we can to wrap up the session here today. If you have any follow-up questions afterwards, we will absolutely respond to any questions you have. Please reach out to us. We're always happy to provide some answers and any specifics. If there are features that you were looking to see were in the new wave that you didn't see here today, again, reach out to us and we can let you know if any of those other things are in the release notes for this Wave 1 2024 release. So with that said, that concludes today's session on the Wave 1 2024 Business Central release. Thank you for taking the time to join us today and walking through these features with me. I hope you found this valuable and informative. Again, don't forget your post-session survey will pop up when the session is concluded. If you have questions, get in touch with us. Let us know what you need. If you're interested in an assessment of Business Central, if you're not currently on Business Central yet and you saw some stuff you really liked here today, then reach out to us and we can talk to you more about that as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being part of our Acquisitive Unite, and we will see you next time.